Hello, and welcome back to Hoi 4, Equestria at War, Colthaginian Republic, under Zalthel Zarka. And in today's video, we are going to be fortifying Koltva, that potentially rebellious land. We must be prepared just in case anything would go wrong there. Koltva occupies a strategic but vulnerable part of northern Zebrica, bordering Zonakin land in Lambet and Quagatai. Not only might fortifications help us in putting down a future Koltva rebellion, they could also be of use if we ever have to fight for reunification of our lands. That is true. Oop. Another cause, another rebel. My Sulfrit, I am sorry for the interruption, but could you spare a moment? Zalthel Zarka looked surprised at the young officer who just came storming up to him in the Senate hallway. However, he was not the zebra to say no to some attention. Very well, Lieutenant. Report. The zebra mare took a second to catch her breath before giving the Sulfrit a sealed letter. A dispatch from our agents in Koltva, sir. There's a change in political activity. Zarka smiled, shaking his head as he broke the seal. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you did not need to gallop all this way to tell me the rebellion is losing strength. He unfolded the paper, although it never hurts to be the bringer of good news. The mare started shuffling on the spot of it, her eyes dispatched nervously, and her beating heart wishing she had been more clear to the highest-ranked commander in the country. Meanwhile, the Sulfur's smile soured as he scanned the paper. Commander of these, Anazaldid, had managed to lower support of the main Koltvan rebel group, the Liberation Army of the East. This had come at a cost. Many former rebel sympathizers have started openly supporting the constitutionalist faction of Zarka's one-time challenger, Zano Mizelatid. This may be due to the general's own influence. When he finished reading, the Sulfur's gaze, now annoyed, fell back upon the mare. I see, was Zalthel's only curt comment. The zebra in front of him was furiously hoping Zal would grant her the power to sink into the floor and disappear, but the lack of divine intervention made her ask, What are we going to do now, sir? We could either say, he can't be trusted, I will replace them with a Zeratura, or we will let him finish his work and monitor the situation. The work must be finished. There may be gaining supports and supporters, but it is worth it to take out this much more major threat. Because once we've dealt with Zeratid and his rebel faction, everything will be better. A landowner's courtesy. Mr. Bodetsthort will see you now, Mr. Zarka. The waitress tilted her head subtly towards the back room door. The Gilded Arabian was an upper-class ladies and gentlecolts club, a den for the old money to strengthen their networks and do business. Zalthel Zarka stood up from his chair and trotted towards the back room, where one stallion was waiting. Zalshik Bodetsthort embodied old money. A gray mane and a gentle colt mustache adorned him, and the stifling smoke from his Cyan Legion cigar made the air moody. Mr. Zarka, thank you for coming on such short notice. It is my pleasure, Mr. Bodetsthort. Zathal lied through his teeth, sitting himself down in front of the landowner's unofficial leader. Few zebras could make the Sulfurt cancel his business to meet them, but Zalshik was one of them. Much to Zarka's annoyance, the next 30 minutes were spent on pleasantries, smoking, a few drinks, and a plate of falafel. Zarka spent the time imagining himself arresting the old-fashioned zebra, but he knew full well he could not, antagonizing his most supportive faction. Finally, Bodetsthort cleared his throat, and pragmatism seeped into his overly familial tone. Now then, Zalthel, I did not call you here merely to talk about my kids and the farm. He put out his third Griffonian cigar in the ashtray. My friends in Koltva have been telling me your new appointment has been interfering with their business. They are telling me this may have an influence on their ability to donate to your cause, unless the interference would be removed, of course. It took Zelthil Zarka all of his willpower to keep calm during his command, disguised his concern. Mr. Botstart, General Anazelid, tells me he is merely making such labor laws as being followed. If your friends hadn't treated Coltvins as glorified slaves... Botstart interrupted, his tone still as sweet as before. My friends are helping Coltvins see the virtue of hard work. I am merely relaying my friend's concerns about Master Anazalid as a courtesy to you and to your father. As always, the decision is yours, and I respect it either way. He smiled and briefly looked at the door, signifying the conversation was over now. Starker briefly nodded and then left the club, heading straight for the office, wondering yet again if he should replace the commander. Zertro will put them at concerns to rest, but if landowners want slaves, they can just buy slaves. We've reduced the landowner's loyalty by 10%. It's fine. It's fine. It's no big deal. It'll be fine. There's no worry at all. No. Bastion Zanet. Colthage is our home, our mother. Without her, we would be nothing. It is Zanet, the stalwart wife of Zal, who wept when Colthage was sullied by the Storm King. Upon Zanet, Zalthel Zarka had taken a precious oath, swearing that never again our homes will be in peril. We will build a bastion that will become our sacred guardian, a true successor to our famed city walls, and Zanet will weep no more. Rebels returned to their fields. Stop here, please, Corporal, Captain Pazeb said to his driver, who stopped the car in front of the wooden fence surrounding a small farm plot. That gate was fixed since we came by here last week. Let's check it out. The captain and his driver got out of their vehicle, trotting into the property with the corporal holding on to his rifle. Pazeb pointed towards a small barn. Remember? That was nailed shut. Now the door is open. The two zebras got close, then entered the wooden building. Looking around, both froze when they heard the distinctive sound of an Ochzor revolver being cocked. Who's there? A young stallion's voice said from behind a hay bale. I'm Captain Pazeb of the Colthaginian army on patrol. Now come out, friend. We were just having a look around, Pazeb said calmly, as the corporal aimed his rifle at the hay. After a sigh, the Coltvin emerged from behind the hay, revolver still drawn at the two others. Army, huh? Was afraid you were with the Liberation Army. He nodded at the corporal, and both put their guns down. What brings you here, Captain? Just patrolling, and I couldn't help but notice the farm looks lived in again. Was the rebel life not for you, my friend? Pazeb smiled. Don't worry, we're not here to catch the other side's deserters. The Coltvin farmer gave a brief chuckle. Guess you could say that again. After hearing about the new police and your commander standing up to the landowners, the old farm started calling to me. The stallion smirked. Picked up my folks from Colterton as well. They told me the captain there is a good zebra. Pazeb shook his head. All that work and I still get aimed at. Either way, good luck with restoring the farm. And good luck with restoring Coltva, Captain. Actually, let's do negotiations with Zeratid. The Coltvin rebels are on the back hoof now, but many Coltvins still rally to their leader, the elusive Zemashir Zeratid. General Jebzel Zablos has proposed a more permanent solution to the rebel leader. General Zeratra will approach the Coltvins and say he wants to overthrow the Zarkids. Once he has their trust, he will lure the Zeratid into a trap and break the rebels' backs. If that is even necessary. We'll have to see. The pilot light. Zeshmatash Zeratid looked out over the small valley in the center of Koltva. Even this place, so far removed from the patrols of the Colthaginian troops, was becoming unsafe for him. General Zilid Anezeld, constitutionalist and Zarka's surprising pick for commander of the East, had managed to dwindle support by the Liberation Army. And he had done it without compromising to the structure of the Coltvin economy, much to the Zeratid's disappointment. A change in tone was enough to convince many peasants to lay down their arms. Although the rebel leader had applauded the changes Anazala did propose, including actual enforcing the rights of Coltvins towards the landed class, the Colthaginians was not willing to, or perhaps not able to, break the power of the landowners. Rain started falling, but the zebra was too proud to go inside for now. Saying defiant against the weather, Zeratid was not the only one, of course, who was still defiant, but he had to be reasonable. Despite some support from the remaining hardliners, it would be amoral and unfruitful to continue the fight without support from the populace. One good zebra is all it takes to protect the worst ones, he lamented. Zeratid grabbed his rifle and held it firmly in his hoof. His mane started to hang low due to the water. But perhaps it was the weather which returned Zeratid's resolve to him. Perhaps his consciousness will call him to us at some point, or to move against Zarka, and then the wound will be exposed again. The Coltvins turned around and grinned to himself. I could not ignite the uprising today, but that does not mean there is no fuel for the fire. Finally, the rebel leader headed inside, shaking his mane clean. I will keep the flame alive, if necessary, alone, and we will minimize Coltvin unrest. Whoop whoop. There we go. Peace in Koltva. Isabel Quartzame, police commissioner of Kizil Zeb, was making her way towards Koltva Square, the center of the city. Only before the Storm King's rampage had the streets been so lively on a normal day. Foals were playing, and elderly zebra were sitting on benches in front of their homes instead of glaring at the streets from behind curtains. With the police and the military now friendly and the Liberation Army disintegrating, the people were gaining control of the streets. Koltva Square, too, had become the bustling hub it was meant to be. Some zebras even took the time to fix up the fountain, which now made for a nice place for the young zebras to hang out. The cafes and restaurants around the square were inviting her in, but the commissioner had one specific place to go. Ah, Commissioner, I hope you will forgive me for changing the place where we meet for today. The weather simply demanded it. General Anazalid said when Querzam approached and sat down. Not at all, Commander. I think you deserve to enjoy the fruits of your labor, he smiled genuinely. Kizil Zeb had been peaceful for weeks now. Instead of rebel plots, Querzam now investigated thefts and bar brawls. Come now, Commissioner, the Coltvins did this to themselves. I just reached out my hoof. They had no reason to trust me, but they took the chance. Querzam's retort was stopped by the waiter asking for their order, and soon both zebras were enjoying a coffee. But I wanted to ask Zilid. The two had moved to a first-name basis for a while now, despite Querzam's initial reservations. What about Zeratid? Nowhere to be found. He did leave a note on my desk, however. The commissioner raised his eyebrow. What did it say? He said he had to stop fighting for now, but that I was not addressing structural flaws in our system. And Azalid smiled. I think he sees a lot more flaws than I do. Querzam shook her head and chuckled. Speaking of flaws, is Zarka jealous of you yet? Oh yes, he recalled me a few times already. But I can't afford to ignore his letters for a while longer. Coltvin unrest will end for good, and we remove Coltvin unrest, which granted those effects. We have done it. We have been a success in stopping the potential revolts in the east. Woo! But now, we have done nothing to fight off potential rebellions in the West. Have we? The Constitutionalist uprising. Despite the early hour, a large crowd of zebra gathered at the border city of Anaza in Zumidia and Zapsa, her neighbor in Colthage across the river. From Zumidia, nervous hippogriff police officers watched as a bearded figure made his way across the bridge amidst loud cheering. The stallion in question was Zano something, leader of the Constitutionalist Army, whose banner was flying over Zapsa now. He was smiling widely as he waved towards the crowd of citizens and soldiers. Once over the bridge, the politician was quickly approached by two generals, Zarvad Orzagid and Azargo, who shared his upbeat mood. Good morning, friends! How pleasant to finally meet you on free Colthaginian soil. Zano exclaimed to the crowd before turning his attention to the generals. It is a pleasure to see both of you could make it to our planned meeting. Tell me, how are you doing? As Argo, impassioned, raised his voice now. The Zapsa plan has exceeded even our expectations. The people have taken control of Zalili, Samarias, Tafermani, and even Hippone. The mention of each chait just caused, woo! Yeah! Oh, we even took that! General Orzagid, trying to calm down his eager colleague, nodded. Our supporters have also taken control of cities along the western coast, as well as most of Colthage. Many garrisons have joined us without a fight, as well as Mizakitid. No doubt Zarka will try to retake Colthage and cut off our supporters into pockets. Let us make haste. Zano, however, seemed distracted by the large crowd, shaking hooves and speaking with them, which caused Orzagid to grin. He seems a bit aloof. Azargardo just smirked and gave the other general a pat on the shoulder. Let him do his thing, and we shall do ours. For freedom. For the Republic, General. Orzagid could not hide his smile looking at the huge crowd. Perhaps this was possible after all. Long live Mazilid! Long live the revolution! The revolution's kind of laggy, but, you know, that's fine. Okay, now first things first, I'm just going to set you guys to push. Sure, whatever. Build more. Boop. 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 And, sure. You know what? No, just build convoy. Just try to build as many convoys as you can. If any. Okay, you guys begin pushing this way, around the coast, around there. You guys should stop there. You should push that way, but you should push that way. You should push this way. You should push there. You should push there. You should push there. You should push there. You should just push there. You should push there. You should push like this. And you push forward. And everyone just go. Constitutionalist uprising in Colthage. The political opposition in Colthage, consisting of constitutionalists and Harmite factions, has launched an armed uprising against the government of the Zarka family. The leader of the rebels, Zano, has accused Sulfrit Zenithel Zarka of subverting the Republic's ancient constitution and rigging the last year's elections. Zenithel blamed Hippogriphia for trying to stage a coup in his country and vowed to swiftly crush the uprising. A chance for peace. The town hall of Zapsa had been turned into a provincial seat of the government for the Constitutionalist Army. It was also the home of Zano Mizakidid. It was early in the morning, and Zano had summoned his advisors over a letter he had received last night. With all due respect, sir, shadowy figures dropping off letters into the bedroom do not seem like the most trustworthy messengers. General Zarved Orzagid sighed, examining the seals attached to it. But it seems genuine enough. Zano smiled, eager to relay the offer. Discretion was required, I understand. Either way, it comes down to this. Baltazar Zerkbar and Batrun Zeres and their scientific and militarist factions realize they cannot win and wish to stop the conflict. If we accept their proposal, they will coup the Zarkids and make peace in return for keeping their place in society. And if we reject, Zanit Zarid, one of the few senators who traveled to the constitutionalist capital in person to support the revolution, interjected. They say it themselves. They have lost. Let us get rid of the whole rotten structure in one kick. If we reject Senator Zaranid, Xano replied, his heart burdened by thought, many more innocents would perish. Xano's words hung heavy in the air, and the silence was only broken by Mezclid himself. Furthermore, the demands seemed reasonable. Both the military and the scientific clique have a place in Colthage, do they not? We fight to bring Colthage back to our control. If you're wondering why there's already a save here and one later, it's because I had a failed recording, which is fun. Both the military and many risked their lives for real change, though they may have been there before the Zarkids. Those two groups exemplify what the people despise of our elite. They run counter to our republican ideals, Zaranzid retorted, earning murmurs of approval from some others in the crowd. More importantly than ideals, however, I worry about deceit. Zakbar and Zeres are cunning, and they only act out of their own interests. Their coup is a shaky foundation for our republic, Orzig added. Another opportunity to stop the fighting I would have taken, but not this. Xano stared down at the letter, considering the words of those around him. Should he really deny a chance for peace? He could refuse the chance for peace and keep fighting, or he could accept the offer from the scientists and militarists. We of course accept. Why would we not? Why, of course we want to bring freedom without having to have our people die. Gosh. Victory in the Civil War. At long last, the rule of law has returned to Colthage. While the Zarkids may have thought they could corrupt the democratic institutions of the state, the will of the citizenry pierced through such delusion as the Constitution Army now controls the nations. Zarka and his loyalists fled the capital when it became clear it would fall to our forces, deserting the city's defenders and running into the countryside in an attempt to repeat his success starting the Storm King's invasion, except this time he would be unable to inspire the people with his autocratic tendencies. As such, he and many other Zarkids entered into surrender negotiations, peacefully handing themselves over to us as symbolic end to the leadership. However, the Senate remains intact and under our intense scrutiny, with an informal coordination council forming to handle the delicate transition to a democratic society while upholding Colthaginian institutions. Though the road may have been long and arduous, the dream of constitution may now be within our grasp. Gade-based war support, minus 25%. Move capital to Colthage. We get rid of liberty or death, which was giving us, we shall either live free or die hard, which is amazing. Yeah. Looking good, looking good. You guys just kind of chill home, like? Have fun there? Form the interim government. Now that we have succeeded in capturing Zelethel and putting an end to his oppressive rule, we must move quickly to form a provisional government and begin preparations for elections. Xano Mizilquitid will oversee this process, but in accordance with his democratic principles, he will not be claiming the title of Sulfret. Instead, an interim one will be selected to serve until elections can be held. But first, let's take a look at Xano. Xano is a son of a landowning, well-off family in western Colthage. He attended a university in Wingbardy thanks to a government exchange program, and there he became part of an ever-growing urban middle class that read Republican Griffonian literature and spoke out against the Zarkid regime as an affront to Colthage-owned Republican traditions. In 1006, when the chaos of the Storm King invasion was dying down, Xano traveled around the nation, gathering support from the citizenry to campaign for an end of the Zarkid's tyranny, and promised them true political and economic reform. All that had to be done was for them to make their voices heard to the Senate. Unfortunately, this led to Xano being arrested a week before the Senate voted Zelethel Zarka in as Sulfret. Xano was eventually released from prison on bail, but managed to make his way across the border into the Hippogriff-run Zumidian Mandate, where he declared the election as illegitimate and began gathering supporters. Personally, he is often seen as aloof, and often not in touch with reality. In Wingbardy, he ended up becoming an advocate of spiritualism, and believes he is a medium who can talk to the dead and magical spirits. He claims the spirit of his dead brother visited him and asked him to dedicate his life to helping others, and to never drink alcohol or smoke. He is also a strong believer in homeopathy, a system of alternative medicine denounced by practitioners of both healing magic and medical science. Regardless, he is well liked by people he meets, and is held in high regard by employees of his plantations. He introduced sweeping education, medical, and social reforms for the plantations and the nearby towns, building schools and hospitals, staffed by actual doctors, thankfully. He is against slavery and the semi-official class system in the nation, and wishes to treat a true liberal democratic Colthage. Seems like a pretty nice guy. And everything I'm seeing, yeah, seems like a pretty nice guy. Maybe a little kooky, but we're all a little kooky. Right? I mean, who's not at least a little kooky? Come on. A new beginning. I swear by the almighty Pantheon to protect the independence of Colthage and the integrity of the territory, to preserve its republican system, to respect the Constitution, to scrupulously look after interests of the nation, and to preserve her ancient institutions. New interim Sulfrits, Zara repeated the oath of office of the Sulfrit. With Zano and the rest of the Senate looking on, except for the removal of the Zarkids, there had been no reshuffle. The elderly Speaker of the Senate went up to the experienced lawyer and diplomat and shook his hoof. Congratulations on your new position. I believe I speak on behalf of the entire Senate when I pray to Zal to grant you strength and wisdom in execution of your office. In response, the Sulfrit gave a smile. Thank you. I'm grateful for your support and hope to pass all necessary reforms of the transitional period. With the formalities over, the Senate proceeded to chat to each other in the marble hall. Senator Zanut Zarid smiled slightly as he approached Zano himself. I do not feel entirely welcome here. Too many familiar faces. Zano nodded. Mr. Zare and I have made arrangements, however. I believe in his integrity here. Zenut sighed. Perhaps the leader of his faction had forgotten how Colthage worked in his absence. The senator briefly glanced over his shoulder, bringing his friend's attention to Balazar Zakbar, leader of the scientists, and Bat Ramses of the militarists. Both zebras were surrounded by their own supporters, eyeing suspiciously at each other. With the Zarkids gone, we have removed their shackles too, not just our own. Zano shook his head and put his hoof on Zanut's shoulder. Simply put faith in the people, my friend, who would vote for a group which blatantly opposes their own interest. I suppose that would not make much sense if you put it that way. Nevertheless, Zanut could not suppress the foreboding in his heart. Colthage will be born anew. Which you join as an advisor. You are a well-respected name in the Colthaginian Foreign Ministry and in embassies far away. As the great eminence of the Republic's democracy, Zara lobbied for support for Colthage when it was occupied by the Storm King. The zebra, already past the retirement age, carries himself with the grace of years, a reliant servant of the public good. And we also get back factionalism, but I read that in my first playthrough of playing this. But I think this is going to be a good enough time as ever to end this episode. In the next one, we will continue on and potentially have another fight. Another war. Might be a little civil. Hopefully. You hope wars stay civil. But anyways, I hope you enjoy, and if you did, like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell button. As always, peace.